Hello, welcome to the CarCast+Edmunds podcast. I'm Matt, the moderator, DeAndrea. We've got a wonderful guest with us today. In addition to Alistair Weaver, we've got Brian Wong from Edmunds.
Welcome to the show, Brian Wong,
Happy to be here.
who is part of the Edmunds team, one of the leading faces and voices on our video content, and the first time you've actually appeared on a CarCast. So there you go.
Yeah, although this isn't our first time doing stuff together. I think we did some media drives at one point. Maybe it was like
Yeah, I think we met on a Ford program. I think it was
maybe it
the
was
Mustang,
like Eco
Mustang
Boost
Turbo
or something a while back, or was it? It wasn't Bullet. No, I think it was Eco Boost. We were up in the woods someplace driving cars.
Yeah, it was EcoBoost up near the Bay Area, I believe.
Yeah, which they did the Bullet events up there too, which was also a fun event, but that wasn't the same. Maybe the EcoBoost was the same area.
Yeah, it was the EcoBoost, and then they did the Mach 1 at Willow, and then they went back to Napa for the Bullet. So all around San Francisco and all around tracks in Southern California and Fords.
So,
Yeah.
Mark, when I talked about like on this show and I say that, the problem these days is I don't have the most fun job and there are other people in the team who have more fun because I'm too busy running spreadsheets and budgets.
Yeah,
Brian's that guy.
I know. I've noticed that. Brian's been that guy.
Yes.
We've got some cool stuff to talk about. Let's just kick it off real quick with the heavy hitter in the room, and that's the Porsche, the GT3, new GT3, and it comes with a hefty price tag. So let's find out if it's worth it or not. First of all, where did you go? Tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, so as Alistair alluded to, I pulled the short end of the straw, and I had to go to Valencia to drive the GT3 both on track and off. Just outside of Valencia, there is a track called the Circuit Ricardo Tormo, and it's actually a stop on the MotoGP Tour. So it's a big boy FIA circuit, really well rubbered in, lots of high-speed corners, not a ton of elevation change, but it was a really stern test for any car. So it's a really good spot to put the GT3.
The bit, Brad, I'm going to cut straight to Jay. I mean, there's two things with this car that really stuck out to me. One is for the first time you can get rear seats, and it's kind of funny. Everybody's like, oh, well, what does that really matter? Well, actually, that was the difference between me not buying a old version of a 911 without rear seats, because like if you got two little kids, actually having them does genuinely make a difference. So there's a little bit, my brain was really excited that you could get rear seats. But then the other part of it is it's 40 grand more for no obvious reason. And when it was first announced, Matt and I were talking about it on the show. I was like, where does this come from? Like, why is it 40 grand more? And I think that's the start. I mean, most of these, a GD3 has gone from basically 200 grand to 300 grand now by the time you've got it in the trim that you would probably ideally like.
Yes. So we drove two vehicles. One we drove on the track. That was the big one with the wing, BiSoc package, all that. That pushed about 290 grand.
Wow.
And we also drove a touring model, which is available out the gate this time. And even that one on the street was, I want to say it was 288-ish and change. So basically $300,000 cars if you're getting all the lightweight stuff that you really want to add on.
And let's be clear, this is the GT, just if anybody's listening and like a little bit confused because we're talking about 300 grand, this is the GT3. This is not the GT3 RS. This is not the GT2. This is not the GT2 RS or whatever, whatever comes in the future. It's not a limited edition special. This is now like the sort of entry level motorsport 911, if you like. And did they talk on the launch about like why they just decided to hike the price so much?
No. They did not. And I think they did it for a particular reason. One is, these cars never sell for sticker anyway. So the old car might have been 180 to start with, but then with options, with dealer markup and going through that whole process, it probably ended up close to this price point anyway. Now, the question is that with the price increase, is that it's going to go even higher? But in some sense, for a vehicle that costs this much, the price is somewhat immaterial. It's hard for me to say that as a person who doesn't have, even 911 base money, but they're going to, sell everyone that they make kind of no matter what the price. So I would say that on the program, they didn't necessarily address that price increase directly. They sort of walked around it a bit. They basically said that, yeah, the price increase, is significant in a very German way. It's a significant price increase, but here's all the sort of minor changes that we made. And they went into those in great detail.
But I get that, right? But I'd love to see the data, and maybe we could probably have the data at Edmunds to pull this. I was once told that the difference between like 100, the amount of people willing to spend 120 grand versus 180 grand, you would be amazed at the drop off. So, and then I would be fascinated, like still like 150, 180 grand, where it kind of used to sit. I can't still think there's a big mental leap from that to 300 grand. And surely that market gets smaller and smaller and smaller. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's just enough rich people out there in the world that will just keep buying it. But it's yeah, without a justification, it's anyway, we should move on and talk about the car rather than just
but
the
I think
price
to
tag.
Brian's point is I think there's enough people that want this car, and if they took the wait list, if you will, and they cut it in half by raising the price, well, there's still a wait list, right? And and the dealer is getting such a big markup on it. Why isn't Porsche going, well, why aren't we getting some of that, right? We need to be a profitable company. Why don't we dip into some of that? So the question is going to be, for example, on the previous version, if the markup was, I don't know, let's just say it was $50,000. Is the markup now 25,000 because people are going, hey, listen, the car's already more money, we're not going to pay 50,000 on top of that? Or is the markup still going to be 50,000? Listen, if I know any dealer out there, they're going to be like, it's even more now, not less. But the thought process, I think, for Porsche is let's make the list that this is available to smaller. They'll make the same amount of cars, but if there's, I don't know what the numbers are. If they make 1,000 of these and there's 5,000 people on the list, maybe jacking up the price means there's 3,000 people on the list now instead. And they're just going to make more money off of it. Maybe that offsets some of the other stuff in the parent company.
The other thing that's kind of interesting is if you own a 992.1 or even a 991 GT3, you're sitting pretty. We should talk on a future show. We've just been doing a big piece of work around our Lucid, and we're about to sell that. And you realize that, and every Tesla customer knows this as well, if you start dropping the price of the new car, it has a really bad impact on the residual values of the old one.
That.
You know that, Matt, as a Lightning customer. If you flip that on its head, if you've got a 99, you've got a GT3 that maybe you paid like 220 for, like suddenly you're sitting pretty. This is gonna increase the value of the used car because the new one's got so expensive. So it works both ways. Should we talk about what it was like to drive, Brian?
Yeah, I think so. To your point, there weren't major mechanical changes, but what little changes that there were, I would say, did make a pretty pronounced difference between driving the 992.1 and the .2 car, mostly due to like changes in front suspension geometry. So this is a little bit nerdy, but basically what they did was they lowered the front pivot point and redid sort of the software background on the adaptive dampers and also shrunk the bump stops and all that. Basically, they made it so that the front dives 50% less under hard braking. So when you're on a high-speed circuit like the one we were on, you can basically fling it hard into the corner and then you get hard on the brakes, and it's almost weird for like the first time you do it because the nose just doesn't go anywhere. Like you can feel yourself slowing down, you can feel the seatbelt catching you, but you don't feel the rear get light, you don't feel all the weight shift forward. They've basically made it so it's almost like an anti-dive system that is still mechanical and doesn't necessarily feel like the ones that you'll get in cars like the Aston Martin DBX 707, which has a very sophisticated anti-roll system that also works under braking, but it feels super artificial. Porsche did a really good job of making it feel very, very mechanical while still improving the overall performance of the car. And there's just tweaks like that kind of all around. Shorter final drive ratio, so it's actually even easier to keep it up where all the power is. So that engine under 6,000 it's fine, but above that is really where you want to keep it. So shorter final drive ratio means that it revs even freer than before. Basically, they turn second gear corners into third gear corners. So it's kind of like, the old GT3 was a bit like driving a Miata, where you hit a corner, you have to drop into second to keep the revs up where you want it to be. And now, since it just gets up quicker, it's just a third gear corner and you can just stay in the throttle that much more. So it's like incremental improvements that all add up. I don't know if they necessarily add up to a 40 grand price increase, which is kind of what I said in our video, is that if you have a 992.1, it will feel familiar, but it'll just feel a little bit sharper. And that's probably not worth 40 grand. But if you don't have a GT3 and you're looking to get into one, this is probably like the most accessible, like race ready one that they've ever made. You can absolutely just dive bomb into corners and it'll make it through the other side.
There's less torque though, isn't there? Isn't it an emissions thing? So the part of the reason why they
Yes.
changed the final drive because there's less torque.
Just a touch less torque. It's down about in the teens of foot-pounds, so still over 330. It's actually this engine actually makes the least torque in the 911 lineup when you get out of the base and the T. So even the 911 Carrera S, the new one that they just announced for this generation, way more torque than this car, and that one's even faster to 60 miles an hour as well. But this thing, just because it can, the way that it handles, it could take every corner at probably 10 to 15 miles an hour quicker just because of how stable it is. And so that's why, even though it's, 3.2 to 60 with the PDK and the GTS is down in the twos, it's still 16 seconds faster around the ring. The 992.1 is. They haven't even put the 992.2 around yet officially. I was talking to Jorg Bergmeister when I was out there. He's one of Porsche's like most famed kind of test drivers, and he said anecdotally he took one around the ring and he did a 659 with traffic. So the new car is going to be significantly faster, even if it is no more powerful.
I think there's always a bit of politics in those ring numbers, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's always
So
a bit of like
competitive.
there's always a little bit of finessing. Oh, hang on a minute. Oh no, it can't be that far. There's always a little bit of like a
Yeah.
PR spin, I think, on those numbers. But
It,
I hear you. I mean, the other thing, right? I think before the other thing that I was looking at, like particularly the price and everything else. I don't think you and I have driven it yet. I certainly haven't. The 911T, which is that sort of entry
Mhm.
level manual, got a lot of the GTS suspension bits and everything else on it. That is like so close to the GT3 touring experience for 140 grand versus
yeah.
280. That car, like if you can have $140,000 bargain, that car's it.
Yeah.
On,
Sorry, Matt, go ahead.
on the GT3, that anti-dive feature, you were saying they changed bump stops and stuff, but is it mostly an active system or is it just a tighter suspension? Because does it get more aggressive on a track than it does around town?
It definitely gets more aggressive out on track, I would say. Like we were actually encouraged. They said go whack all the curbs because the front's just going to handle it that much better. So the bump stop at the top, they basically took it from here down to about here, and
Yeah.
they basically said that the bump stop has no give to it now. So we don't want the car to ever bottom out. So they changed the software so that it now more aggressively dials in pressure in the damper as it starts to compress. And the other thing that that does too is it also increases the amount of travel. So now the wheel can actually travel up and down further, but when it gets close to where that bump stop and you might feel like that very harsh bottoming out, the damper stiffens up enough to keep you off of it. So it has the effect of like just basically more front isolation, but somehow they've maintained the feel of it. And that's sort of like the Porsche thing is like they have all these systems sort of at work, but you don't necessarily feel them working underneath you. The whole process still feels really mechanical and really communicative. Like other adaptive suspensions out there, like MagneRide is pretty good, but you can
Yeah.
definitely tell that it's trying to like hide things from you. This still shows you everything, but it just makes it more confidence inspiring.
So when you took the touring out and drove it on the streets, was it a comfortable ride or is this car significantly stiffer? Does it drive like a race car?
It doesn't drive like a race car. She drives something like an Huracan STO that like kind of never stops being a race car. This one does a bit better than that on the street. It's still stiff though.
Yeah.
I would say that if you're like living in an area with like pretty bad roads, you'll feel them for sure.
Well, like America.
Yeah.
Like America. So like the isolation isn't great, but it's livable. And if you wanted a more comfortable 911, they'll happily sell you a turbo or a GTS or something like that.
There was
Yeah.
there's a famous story. Audi used to engineer all its cars for Germany, where the roads are like super smooth. Might be
Yeah.
something to do with the war, but they and then they were selling loads of cars in the UK, and every like press report was like the ride's terrible. And in the end, they decided they better come to the UK and like drive Audis in the UK, and like it was just a huge shock. Just like going from one, over here we've got concrete roads makes such a difference. There's so many cars that work, and I don't think they're doing retuning for the US, but that's why things like a GT3 can feel pretty extreme over here
Yeah.
in a way that they maybe don't where Porsche's doing most of its testing. So.
I mean, even just out here in California, you think of how many times you see, test cars in the camouflage wrap, BMWs and stuff all in the area. They're like, well, they're not building them out here. but they're bringing them out here to test them because they sell so many out here and our roads are so terrible. It's like if you can't drive that thing down the 405 over by the 10 and have it start bouncing all over the place, it could get pretty uncomfortable. And you're right, the people will be like, yeah, I just want to get something that's a little more comfortable these days. That's why we sell so many Range Rovers in LA, I think.
And I think that's why the Porsche, like the 911, has now got so much diversification that something like a GTS is a lot softer in inverted commas than it used to be if you go back a couple of generations, but
Yeah.
then they still do the GTs as kind of extreme. So they've just got so much bandwidth, and then they've got the T for like the diehard fan who can't afford a GT3. So that's now I think with the price of a GT3 now, the T is now the aspirational choice for normal in inverted commas people.
Yeah. All right, Brian. So what's the verdict for the extra money? Is it there? Like at $300,000, the competition is interesting.
It is. Yeah. No, we recently had a Aston Martin Vantage at our test track that was around similar sticker price to the GT3. And driving that around our handling circuit, I was like, I would take the GT3 in a heartbeat over this car. And that's a
Okay.
great car. The new Vantage is way better than the old Vantage, more stable at speed, more predictable, won't try to kill you in a corner. Looks fantastic, sounds fantastic. I would still take the GT3 over that car just because there's a confidence that it gives you. That's the kind of word I came back to because we were pretty lucky. Like we went on so for these first drives, you're on all sorts of different kind of waves. We got to go on a video wave because we were filming, and it was what I would call limited supervision. So usually you kind of have to get in line with the other journalists and you're kind of waiting for your turn to go on the track. But they basically gave us the keys and said, here, you have 90 minutes to get what you need and go have fun. And
Yeah.
so throughout that session, my speed just kept going up and up and up and up and up and up. And it's just shocking how stable that car is, especially when you're driving it super, super hard. So for the money, like, is anything worth that money? Probably not. But if the experience in it is sort of unreplicable, like even the Aston, great car, doesn't deliver in the way the GT3 does. It's very unique in that way.
The only one I would put up there as which has really impressed me in the last 6 months is the Corvette Z06, which is literally half the price. I know there's markups and stuff, but like on at an entry level point, a Z06 or the Z07 pack with all the carbon bits, that's like half the price. And if you just want to go fast and have fun, try and have something that sounds amazing, that's where it is. Or like a 911T, which is kind
Yeah.
of similar money to the Z06.
I mean, to your point, ZR1 is going to be $100,000 less, arguably.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you're
ZR1
not
is going to
looking
be exactly. It's got 1,000 horsepower and all the rest of it, and probably as easy to live with day by day as well. But we're talking of because I wanted to talk about sensible cars that Brian's also recently done a video of, but we should
Yeah.
talk briefly about a car that I enjoyed driving this week, and we had at the test track on Monday, and we have a film coming out about it soon. Was the new Bentley Flying Spur? This time in a kind of a sort of McLaren papaya orange, but
Yeah.
like a matte paint scheme.
I call
I
it a
mean,
San Francisco Giants paint scheme. It's orange and black.
I parked it outside I parked it outside my house briefly, and like everybody was just like, yeah, there you go. If you're watching on YouTube, that's what it looks like.
It's
It might
very
just
orange. Actually, I don't hate it. I mean, it wouldn't be the color that I'd buy, but I don't hate it.
I like the
No?
interior at night. And when you go in the interior is mainly black with orange piping. And
Yeah.
then, but at night, it had this like orange LED stuff going on. And I mean, I'll be interested what you think, right? I drove it, I kind of commuted in it, which is I can't ever imagine I mean, like, if I had the money, I could totally see myself buying a GT3. This is similar money, actually, about 300 grand, I think, in the one that we had.
This one was just over 360. So I think it was
Exactly.
367 and change. Starts
Yeah,
at
he's
about
getting up there.
270, so almost 100 grand of options there. Yeah, you got to commute in it. I took it around the track, drove it down the Excel Straight, did all that stuff in it. It hauls. It moves quick for something that weighs 6,000 pounds.
And this is the plug-in hybrid, and this is the best plug-in hybrid. And it's basically shared with the Porsche Cayenne e-hybrid. It's that kind of, and it's the Urus as well, the Lamborghini Urus. But it's a brilliant plug-in hybrid because you drive a lot of them, and it's like everything just feels disjointed, that everybody's competing with each other. This thing is so seamless, and it also has a bit of the one pedal driving that you get in an EV.
Mhm.
Yeah.
You get quite a lot of heavy regen, and it just felt very seamless. And I was like, if this is where plug-in hybrids are going, I'm going to have to change my tune and like get on board with this, because I know this is like the top end of the market, but I was really impressed by how that worked. But it's just an imperious way to go down the road. The ride quality is fantastic. I sort of get it. I could never imagine myself, maybe as a used car actually, but I could never imagine myself spending, no matter if even if I had the money, it's just not me. It's just too ostentatious, too in your face, too kind of extrovert. Look how rich I am.
Mhm.
But just as a way to travel, it's lovely.
Yeah. But you got to live in the right neighborhood with it because it's like there is, I mean, I hate to say it, it's like you work hard, you earn it, and you are able to buy a car like that, for example, and then you're driving around in a neighborhood where it's just getting too much attention. You know, it's like I get it, but you kind of want to drive it in a neighborhood or a community where other Bentleys live. You just don't want to be the only one there. You get a little bit of shamed into it, but yeah. But to your point to the GT3, I mean, the GT3 is is probably a profitable collector for down the road, whereas the Bentley, a lovely car to drive, and I would just drive it and enjoy it because you're probably going to lose some money on that car.
Yeah, GT3 is a $300,000 investment. The Bentley is a $300,000 purchase, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's, but it's a lovely.
But look, one of them you can drive, and one of them you kind of have to like, limit the miles and think twice about, and it's got to be all, like, is it spec the right way? Like, you're buying a piece of art. You're right, an investment piece. Where the Bentley, I mean, yeah, get the nice car that you want, and if you could afford it, and drive it, just
The
drive
thing,
it.
it's an interesting because I was thinking about this driving it home is everything's got so democratized because I just got out of our Model 3 Performance, which is what 60 grand, isn't it, roughly speaking, and or any of the other cars that you drive because you basically everything now has CarPlay. So even in the Bentley, you tend to default to CarPlay, or I
Yeah,
do anyway because I
yeah,
like
yeah.
my podcast and stuff. And actually, then it's not faster than the Tesla. It's got CarPlay, which everything a $20,000 Nissan has. It's got the same space as something like a Toyota Camry, maybe a little bit more. So there's not a lot like objectively that you say, in the old days you used to get in a Mercedes S-Class and you'd see stuff that you just never saw in any other car. I think today everything's become so democratized that the safety kit's pretty much the same, the infotainment's pretty much the same. They all go fast enough. So what you're really buying into is like the personalization and the material choice and everything else. And it's like, well, how can you possibly justify this? And then I was going down the road and I was like, I kind of get this. The smell, the feel. There's something intangible about like proper luxury.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was really the question that we set out to answer too was, as we were filming our video was because you're not paying for features. It's
No.
got a 12.3-inch screen. That's the same size screen that comes standard in a Kia K4 now. Like you said, CarPlay and Android Auto. I mean, Bentleys didn't even have Android Auto until recently. That's kind of like a recent addition to the Bentley portfolio. But the infotainment system is a reskinned Audi system. The engine is a Porsche and Lamborghini Volkswagen Group engine as well. A lot of the buttons and switchgear have like Audi kind of icons on them. I'm like, oh, I recognize that from like this
Yeah.
other vehicle that I was in recently. And I guess if you're not paying for features, to your point, what you're paying for is not a Bentley, I'm paying for my Bentley. So
Well, look, I mean,
101 exterior colors, 22 different leathers types, there's billions of combinations. You can basically make the exact one you want.
a Timex probably has more features than a Rolex does, and they both tell time, but it's because you can buy one is why you get one. It's because you can, right? And
Uh,
and you're right. It is a lovely car. And like you said, it's quick. It probably does things that it shouldn't do. Uh, and you if you can buy one, that's why you buy one. It's the same thing. As a guy who likes watches, Alistair, you understand.
I do get it. Yeah,
Um,
I do get it. But
all right.
I don't lose money on watches. That's the bit about how wealthy you are. The trouble with all these really great luxury sedans is I can't imagine spending 300 grand and like losing 150 on it. You know, if you spend
Yeah.
5 grand on a watch or whatever, it's an awful lot of money to spend on a watch, but your watch is still kind of worth 5 grand or pretty much.
Yeah, well, I lost probably 30 grand on a pickup truck, and I'm not going to get that back. And I can't afford to lose that either. So it's an unsellable hunk of metal sitting in my garage.
But well,
Uh,
I mean, okay, not my money, but you're talking the man who signed off a Fisker, and actually, we'll save it for another show because we want to talk Civic hybrids. But
yeah,
we just overhauled our long-term test fleet, the fleet that we buy cars. We talk about we buy cars to live with day by day, and we've just sold off a chunk of it, and the difference in used car values is really stark. Like Grand Cherokee 4XE, disaster.
yeah,
Chevrolet Blazer EV, disaster.
yeah.
Rivian R1T, another electric truck, actually pretty good.
Okay.
And I've just figured out because I've just done the video on it, but the Lucid, our Lucid has depreciated at $3 a mile. The Rivian depreciated at $1 a mile in the same
Okay.
time frame. So there's big, but this would be a great subject for another show, and where we can dig into a bit more. But there's big disparities going on here, even amongst cars that you imagine would compare.
Yeah. All right, let's take a quick break and then we'll talk about some things that are more sensible. Okay, so Porsche aside, Bentley aside, I'm sure it was a wonderful trip to Spain to be able to drive that
Mhm.
car and even the Bentley, just even if it was around town and its bright orangeness to it. But um, you guys put together a more real world test with Civic. It was just Civic. It was Civic and what
So
else?
it was the new Kia K4, the replacement
Okay.
for the Forte, the Honda Civic hybrid, and the Toyota Corolla hybrid. So two hybrids and one gas, all compact sedans, all vehicles that you don't actually have to worry about where you're going to park them. So that was nice.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I think, it's sort of like the opposite goal was to show that, hey, like there are still affordable cars out there, even though average transaction prices are now pushing 50 grand. There's still deals out there and you can find them if you're looking for really good value for money.
Yeah.
And just
Okay.
nice. I mean, I've driven all of those as well, and we talked a lot about the Civic Hybrid winning the Edmunds Top Rated Award, and we think it's a fantastic car for 30 grand. But that K4 starts at what, like early 20s, and that is a lot of car for some, for like the early 20s.
hmm Down around 23,000 to start. You do get the base engine, which is not great. Base engine kind of punchy, like really lacks torque, especially, so it doesn't really get up and go very well. But on that base car, you're still getting a 12.3-inch touchscreen, and that was a bigger touchscreen than you're getting with the optional screens in both the Honda and the Toyota. So Kia continues on, especially the lower trim levels of all their vehicles that they sell, to just really offer incredible features for money. Um, yeah, you could buy like I said, the base Kia K4 has the same size screen as the Bentley Flying Spur Speed. So it's kind of crazy to think
Say
about.
that in the pub, and it doesn't, the styling's got so good and the manufacturing's so good. You wouldn't you wouldn't turn up at the pub. The only thing that's sort of for me that differentiate a little bit is the wheels are quite small.
Mhm.
And that makes it look like a value prop. But the rest of it, like the styling, the look of it, inside and out, you definitely don't get into it and say this is a 25 grand vehicle. It feels way better than that.
Yeah, it looks completely different too than any other compact sedan. Like we see a lot of segments now where a lot of vehicles have started to kind of get to be the same shape, the same kind of look. I think of mid-sized three-row SUVs. We did one of those recently, and from the side, we had two of them that were the same color, and I was like, I cannot tell these apart at all. So it's nice to have something like the Kia in there, which looks and feels different both inside and out, and yeah, also gives you just absolutely incredible value at that price.
Do you think the Kia is good enough to really start chipping away at the sales of Corolla and Civic? I mean, they've certainly got a lot of history and reputation there.
I think so. I mean, it's like you said, there's a bit of like nameplate attachment that people have. But I would say in the past 10 years or so, Kia has really stepped up, especially when it comes to interiors and when it comes to like aesthetics. They put a real big focus on design, on making their cars sort of look and feel different than the competitors. And I think that they're starting to see those dividends pay off now. I mean, I would put it up against the other two, especially on the interior. It basically kind of feels in some ways like they're EV interiors, which are quite nice. And it's nice that they've taken that and like pulled it down into even the more uh, economy cars like in their fleet. So you get a really good central storage bin with like retractable cup holders. You have three screens technically on the top of the one we had. So we had a GT line turbo, three screens up there, one for the climate control. That one's not great, but two 12.3-inch screens side by side behind one sheet of glass. That's kind of stuff that was like top end maybe 3 or 4 years ago and is now just up and down their whole lineup.
It probably, for their perspective, makes sense to get like if you can just bulk buy the screens, and I think that's why like again it's like BMW now. You get into it, and it's like, well, which car am I actually? Because they've all got the same screen, and looking at where their technology is going to go, everything is going to get the same. It's
Yeah.
the Corolla. You know, I mean, the Corolla is just such a staple, isn't it? I mean, it feels a little bit old. It feels and looks a little bit old now, even though it's not actually that old, is it? But they and then the Civic is just a fantastic all-rounder. But I think it's really good that, you know, I think everybody's now looking at the market and saying people can't afford a 50 grand car, particularly when the finance options aren't great. You know, if interest rates were still 2% or whatever it was, or if everybody was offering huge incentives and you could get into these things, then the cost of ownership becomes, you know, the cost of purchase becomes okay. But if you've got 50 grand average price and high interest rates, people can't afford it. And you're seeing that in the used market as well. So it's fantastic that actually there are alternatives out there. And, you know, in those 20,000, 30,000 mark, maybe you are looking at new versus used, but there's a lot of advantage of going down the new route because you get, you know, Kia's got what, a 10-year warranty, Brian, isn't it? And
Yeah,
there's
so
a whole
10-year, 100,000 on the powertrain, 6 year, 5 year, 60 or something, 6 year, 60, something like that, just basic warranty. Both of those are tops. It's
Yeah.
about double the standard warranty you're getting on the Corolla.
just makes a ton of sense. And as I say, we talked about it before, that Civic Hybrid is just an awesome car
Yeah.
for 30 grand. And if you leave aside the emotional bit, like I drove it and I was objectively, this is like every car we need, really.
Yeah. No,
Right.
I mean, am I okay to spoil the result here?
Yeah, because it's out.
Yeah,
Well,
it's
it's
already out.
published,
So
isn't it?
the Civic Hybrid was the winner. Even though the Kia kind of won more of the categories that we were covering, and that's just because it absolutely just whomps everything else when it comes to driving. It's just so much better to drive than the K4, which kind of the turbo engine's a bit of a letdown, real laggy. It's slower to 60 by zero point 0.8 seconds than the Civic Hybrid is. The Civic Hybrid steers better, rides better, quieter, just in every sort of like driving aspect.
And
the
fuel
Honda just
economy
really
as
won.
well was the
Yeah.
big one, isn't it? If you haven't got
Yeah.
the hybrid, the fuel economy makes an enormous difference. Yeah, it's live on YouTube. You're already out there, Brian.
It's
We
out
tried.
there. But look, I
Oh, you mean you've spoiled the result? So if you're hacking your way through all 25 minutes and are desperate to see which
Yes.
wins, you've just ruined it. There you
But
go.
no, sorry, go ahead,
I
Matt.
I think
It was Kaiser Soze.
it was Jose. I think the Kia gets my attention because it's now in a conversation with Corolla and Civic, two cars that have been around and have done so well for so long that it's in a conversation, in a reasonable conversation, going, it's good, it's really good. And you're saying it's really good compared to Corolla and Civic. That means it's really, really good, right? Because if
Yeah.
you know, like we could pick a category where everything is, you know, mediocre, and if you're, you know, if you're the best of the mediocre bunch, that's not the same as is competing with Corolla and Civic, which have done so well for so long,
I think
especially in that price range. You know, it's like when you get to a little bit more expensive price range, like how how great was the BMW 3 Series for so long? It just
mhm.
became the benchmark. Like every other car company was buying a 3 Series to compete against, to build their car as a model against. And how many car companies are buying like Corolla or Civic as their benchmark, going, we need to go after this car, you know? And if Kia can be in that same conversation, then I think they're doing a good job. I mean, as you said, they didn't win, but
Yeah.
but they're there.
But I can make a really good case for the K4 because the Civic Hybrid, the sort of thing that it struggles with in some sense is that to get the Civic Hybrid that we really liked, you have to buy the top end trim. Because if you go down even one trim level, you lose the bigger screen. So you go down to Honda's worst infotainment on a smaller screen with no Google integration. You
Yeah.
lose out on a lot of the really good features. And because Honda doesn't do options packages, the only way to get all the things that you really want is to go to the very top of the Civic lineup. And also, they only offer that hybrid powertrain on the top two trims. So you're basically looking at 30 grand minimum to get into the hybrid powertrain with the good fuel economy on the Civic. Whereas the Corolla, they offer that hybrid powertrain up and down the lineup. So it's actually a lot cheaper to get 50 or so MPG by going the Corolla route. You can do that for about 23 grand. And then for the Civic, you're looking at least 30, and the one you really want is about 32. And that's really where the Kia fits in, is that if you want to spend somewhere like 25, 26, get really good features and maybe not have all the fuel economy, it makes a really compelling case for itself there.
Depends how many miles you're doing, I guess.
Yeah. Honestly, I didn't even know you could buy a $25,000 car and have it be decent. I didn't know you could buy
Yeah,
one. I mean, it just seemed like where are we? The average price is over $40,000 now for a
When
new
I
car, but to have something that's good, under 40,000, let alone 30 grand is impressive.
Do you know what Matt, I mean, like Nissan's made this big deal about, hey, we've got, I think it's like six cars under 30 grand or something. It was part of their marketing for a while. We had a Sentra down at the test track on Monday, and I hadn't driven one in forever. And I thought, I took it around. I took it out on the track, and I took it, I had a good decent driver and sat in the back and all the rest of it. I thought this is still it's similar. It's like it's bigger than the Civic. Obviously, I thought this is a decent, this is a decent package, and it's important that we continue to this is our heartland. This is what we'll continue to test, and there's a lot of good, reliable options out there without spending a fortune. I think that's really important right
Yeah.
now. 'Cause, you
And
know,
I think there's a few things that we've always kind of said, like there's a handful of things you expect in the luxury vehicles that really wouldn't cost extra to bring them into the affordable vehicles. Like, you see things like diamond stitch on the interior. I was like, that doesn't need to be $100,000 car. Like, how much extra does it cost to give it a stitch pattern? Like, and especially when you're starting to see things like Genesis and stuff going, oh well, for 50,000, it's still a lot of money, but $50,000, you're getting a nice interior that you're expecting in a $100,000 car, right? Why? Because they did some soft touch materials and did a quilted stitch on the seats. Like, how much more did that really cost? So why not bring that into, like, I don't think the base level of cars need to have just like the most plain, ugly cloth seats. Like, I get it, it's fine, but it doesn't have to be that way and everything plastic. Like, you could.
it also depends where they put them. I remember talking to somebody from Skoda. If you're not familiar, Skoda was like the cheaper,
Oh
the
yeah.
budget brand for Volkswagen in Europe. It's never made it to the US, although I think actually it could have done quite well here. And I remember talking to them about like how much more money is it to do like a soft touch top of the dashboard? It's instead
Yeah.
of like super hard plastic, how much is it to make it a bit squidgy? Because it always feels that much better quality. They said like at the volume we do, I think it was something like 20 euros. It was like a ridiculous sum because they were buying so much of this material.
Yeah.
But some of it was marketing. They didn't want Volkswagen got soft, touchy stuff. Maybe
Yeah.
not in America, it does in Europe. But they didn't want to have that for Skoda. And also, like I guess $20 times, 500,000 units or whatever actually becomes quite material. But it was fascinating how low it is. And we talked the other week about having the Equinox EV with a plastic steering wheel.
Yeah.
It's like, what's the unit cost of a plastic steering versus a low grade leather one? Yet that's the bit that you're touching all the time. And I sometimes think they just decontent the wrong bits. And it's almost like trying to say to the consumer, you should have worked harder at school. You bought the poverty spec version. And it really annoys
Right.
me because sometimes I feel like their product planners put the money in the wrong place.
I,
It's
I,
not
I
that
agree with that. It's like, where are you saving money, and why would you want to save money in the most obvious, most interactive piece like a steering wheel or something? I always get annoyed by like AC vents that are just so flimsy and crappy. Like you can't just add a little tension to it. Like what are we doing there? Or a button where it's just a loud, clicky, no real feedback to it, or just a, like it feels like a game station controller from 30 years ago. It's just like, why can't we just do the small things? Because those small things will make all the difference. There's got to be ways to save some money someplace else.
Well, to your point, so, and this is the first time I've ever seen this before. The Kia that we had was top trim level. It was the only vehicle that we had with heated and ventilated front seats in that whole bunch. But that front passenger seat was actually manually adjustable. So I've never before seen a heated and ventilated seat that was also manually adjustable. So these cars, they are affordable. They are cutting corners in places. It's just cutting them in the right places.
I'm for that though, Brian. I'm
Yeah.
like happy. I frankly find electric seats a pain in the proverbial at times because it takes too long to adjust. And my wife's 5'7", I'm 6'4", and it's just like, oh, come on. Whereas I like little handle, I can just, I can do it faster. It's a bit like I can open my own trunk as well. I don't need a motor
Exactly.
every time I open a trunk.
And right, the heated and cooled seats you'll use way more than you will
Exactly.
moving the seat around. Like I really
Yeah.
don't care if it has a manual seat. Like
No,
it's
it's a
fine.
trade you would
And-
make in a heartbeat.
it's funny because it's like Adam Carolla's game that he played Rich Man, Poor Man. Like what is something that Rich Man, Poor Man would have?
Yeah.
Manual seats, right? Like the least expensive car has manual seats, and then some of the most expensive high performance cars, they want to save weight, so now they're going to charge you extra because it has a manual seat, right? With that won't recline and it's not comfortable. It's it's the Lamborghini Huracan, like was it the STO seat or whatever it is?
Yeah, the STOC was like non-adjustable.
The one where you're just
Yeah.
you can't get you just can't wait to get out of that car because it's so uncomfortable, hurts your back. Like I was like, yeah, that's because it's the. I mean, I get the seat materials are different, but they're
Yeah.
like, let's make it lightweight and it's not adjustable and it's manual moving. It's like
That
okay.
brings us full circle to the GT3 because one of the features that they touted was that their carbon fiber bucket will actually fold forward now. So if you get the lightweight package on the Touring, you can actually fold the seat forward, and now you can get to the back seat that Alistair is really looking forward to.
Yeah.
I'm all for that.
Yeah, Alistair's the only one who wants a back seat in that car. I mean, neither here nor there. It's fine because
No,
if you have
it
that
was
car,
all
you
the
put the
geeky thing.
Bentley in your garage next to it. You get the bright
Hey.
orange Bentley, and you get a bright lime green GT3, and now you've got the family pair.
I have a friend in Dubai who's a hedge fund guy and pays zero tax because he lives in Dubai. And his garage is a chauffeur-driven Mercedes S-Class and a GT3 RS. And I'm like, yeah, that works.
It works, right?
That works to me. And a golf cart for when he's like just trundling around the neighborhood. I was like, yep, that's a good good garage.
All right, what's coming up next for you guys? What's going on? What's next for Edmunds?
What have we got going on? We got a bunch of stuff more coming around Forerunner. I think there's going to be a lot of attention on that. We just did another great video that Nick on the team did with comparing Forerunner with Land Cruiser with Tacoma. That's out. We've got some more sensible stuff coming. Brian's thing on the Bentley's coming up as well. If you don't want to be sensible, yeah, it's just a busy.
We've got
it's a busy
Forester
time.
hybrid versus CRV hybrid and RAV4 hybrid. That's
an
an
coming up.
interesting comparison.
How do you know about that one? I don't think that's even published yet, is it?
It's literally published.
Oh, is it published right now? I forget. Like I know about these things. We have plan these things months in advance. I can never remember what's going live.
I'll tell you what. I'm just going to share my little cheat sheet right now, and it is the edmunds.com/news page.
There you go.
It is the very public cheat sheet that you can take a look at.
There will be a video forthcoming. That's just a news article for now, but
Oh yeah, I gave it away there, Brian, didn't I? Yeah, there is.
it's okay.
Yeah.
The Forerunner content will be really exciting because the first one was just kind of like a parking lot comparison. So like, what are you getting from the different Toyotas versus the Forerunner? The next one will be a bit more dynamic. So we got to take that off road, put it up against a Wrangler and a Bronco, sort of the best of the best, to see if the Forerunner can actually keep up now. That was pretty exciting to film. Shot that this week. And then yeah, Bentley, and then Dodge Charger EV. Also, we got to test, and that'll be coming too.
Yeah.
It's all happening.
All right. Yeah, guys, sounds good. I appreciate it. Of course, check out edmunds.com and check out Edmunds on YouTube as well, so you can catch all of these great videos. Brian, thanks so much. Good seeing you again, although virtually. I'm looking forward to the next trip we get to go on. Nobody sends me to Spain, but something locally we'll figure it. We'll all hit Irwindale. Is that still open? We'll hit
I think
Irwindale.
it closed, but
I
we'll
think it's
find something
done.
else. Yeah.
Yeah, we could drive around town at Irwindale like the last
We'll drive
Florida
around the
thing
fence
was.
and think about all the fun things that happened there.
Yeah. All right. Am I missing anything, Alistair? We got it all covered?
I think we're all good. I'm about to see a man about a garage door, so I better run.
All right. Thanks, guys. Until next time, keep the air in the spare and the bag in the wheel.